Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a late night audiobook impressions episode here on the channel. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and yes, I know, it's been a while since I did another episode. I actually just went back to my channel. It was almost 2 weeks since I last did a follow-up to The Gathering, but I am here now, and today's episode will be a little bit longer to make up for those chapters. Now, where we last left off, the new champions were trying to find the old heroes, Richard, Maury, and Sparrow. And right now, Maury has been captured, or rather redeemed, by Decimus and Tira. And a new threat is on the horizon. So, let's dive right in to chapter 26. While most heroes went north or west, Avalon and Vortigern traveled east, beyond the dead woods, into unknown territory, the Black Mountains. The Black Mountains were once the Desmodo's ancestral homes, but they had since moved on. Upon nearing the mountain chain base, the two Wendigos stopped momentarily. Avalon felt his medallion hum and glow blue. "This seems to be the place. Sparrow must be nearby," said Avalon. "He'll be hard to find in these mountains," replied Vortigern. "Let's hope we find him first. Best we leave the basilisks here." Leaving their beasts behind, the two trackers began scaling the rocky cliffs. As they climbed further up, they heard an ominous sound, almost like a bird. Avalon and Vortigern took cover behind some rocks. Once hidden, Avalon talked to the Guardian. "What was that?" he asked. "It appears an avian has followed us." Avians were beings who could transform into bird-like creatures, ranging from small, harmless forest dwellers to massive sky raptors. "Any idea why it is hunting us?" said Avalon. "It appears the avian's not hunting us. It's looking for something else entirely," said the Guardian. "Or someone else," added Vortigern. "Precisely," said the Guardian. Avalon knew he and Vortigern had to find Sparrow before the avian did. Looking around the corner, Avalon looked all over the night sky. He could not see nor hear any avians nearby. That did not mean one was not present. Thinking they were safe, the pair continued their ascent. Near the middle of the mountain summit, Vortigern stopped for a moment. "What's wrong?" asked Avalon. "I hear something." Just then, a loud, high-pitched caw came from the sky. Its sheer noise stunned the two trackers, nearly paralyzing them. Then out of the darkness, two glowing red eyes descended upon them. As they ducked, they narrowly escaped the grasp of the vicious talons. Reeling from their encounter, Avalon and Vortigern saw what had attacked them. Standing before them was a jet-black, feathered, 9-foot-tall bipedal creature with the head of an owl. It had razor-sharp claws, and its large, glowing red eyes glowed within its gray face. Its wings looked more massive than before. Avalon and Vortigern pulled out their weapons. "Where is the Sparrow?" squawked the avian. "Wouldn't you like to know?" chirped Avalon. The avian let out a loud hiss. "Do not test me, scavenger. The Sparrow will be found, and you will all die." Screaming again, the massive owl flew back to resume its hunt. "That was too close for comfort," said Vortigern. The duo then found themselves at a cave entrance as they reached the top of the cliff. Avalon looked at his medallion and noticed it was glowing brighter than before. Vortigern, who, despite protesting, knew they had to go inside. Going in, the pair made sure to stick together. They did not want to get lost. Avalon felt the walls close in all around them as they walked deeper into the cave. It was soon getting hard to breathe. "There's no way Sparrow would be in here. It's too small for him," Avalon thought to himself. Suddenly, the king unknowingly made his way to the end of the cave. "Damn, we gotta go back," said Avalon. Yet, as he turned around, Vortigern was nowhere to be seen. He looked around him, but there were no pathways except the one they just went through. Vorgir, he whispered, but not. Or rather, no response was given. He asked the guardian to locate Vorgir's last location, but even there he got no response. The medallion was cold. No glow at all. He was now alone in the darkness. Even without his medallion, Avalon was skilled and an experienced tracker. He had gotten himself out of a few caves in the past, and using his keen sense of smell, he followed the scent left behind by himself and Vorgir. Tracking the scent, he picked up on someone else's. Sparrow? He thought. Following the scent led him out of the cave and even higher up the cliffs, sniffing the air once more. He climbed even further, and reaching another ledge, he pulled himself up and saw Vorgir tied to a rock with a gag around his mouth. He rushed over and pulled the claws out of his mouth. What happened? Said Avalon. I got hit from behind. Next thing I know, I'm tied to this stupid rock like bait. Vorgir replied, Where's Sparrow? Avalon then heard a bowstring being pulled from behind. The young Wendigo cursed silently. Drop your weapons and turn around slowly, said a voice. The young hunter slowly removed his weapons and placed them on the ground. He then turned around and locked eyes with his ambusher. Sparrow, greeted Avalon. It's Kanata Konha, he replied. The two stared at each other, waiting for the next move. So, this is it, I guess, said Avalon. Kanata Konha nodded his head. You're going to kill me with a bow and arrow? It seems like a dishonorable way to kill somebody, especially unarmed. Would you rather have an option? Replied Kanata Konha. I'd rather die like a warrior than a cornered animal, said Avalon. Kanata Konha paused for a moment. He could kill them right now, but a strict Mohawk code would not allow him to kill a defenseless target. Lowering his bow, he tossed it aside. Grab your weapons, he ordered. The young Wendigo reached for his daggers. With one in each hand, he prepared himself for a fight. As for the Mohawk, he had his tomahawk and iron knife, with both parties each to arm. The two waited, but before either could do anything, the three heard a loud, cheating sound. It was raspy and abrupt, and very close. They each looked up and saw the same pair of red eyes in the sky. Then, like before, the eyes descended upon the trio, going after the Mohawk, knocking the young native off balance. The avian pinned Kanata Konha to the ground. Its beak tried to peck at him, but the Mohawk kicked the avian off of him. Tumbling over, he lunged at the avian and stabbed it with his knife. The blade plunged deep into its back. Small pockets of blood squirted out all over the black feathers. It screamed in pain. Furious, she grabbed his hand and used her talons to break his grip holding the knife. He dropped the blade. Towards the end, she slashed him across the face with her other hand. The talons left deep marks across his face, but thankfully it missed his eyes. Still, Sparrow grunted in pain. The avian then kicked Kanata Konha back to the ground. Getting on top of him, she wrapped her hands around his throat and began to squeeze, choking him. He struggled to fight back, but her grip was stronger than anticipated. The more he struggled, the more he felt himself losing consciousness. Time to die, she said, as the young Mohawk choked on his final words. She was unaware of the other two trackers from before. Let him go, Featherbrain, shouted Avalon, throwing one of his daggers at the creature. The blade went all the way through and embedded itself in the animal's upper back, just above the shoulder blade. The avian grunted in pain once more. This caused her to loosen her grip as she tried to pull the blade out. Gasping for air, Kanata Konha scrambled to get his bow. Just as he reached for a weapon, he saw the avian pull the dagger out from her back and look at him with anger in her eyes. Notching the arrow, he pulled back on the bowstring and let it fly. The arrow hit its target at close range, dead center in the chest. It stopped her in her tracks momentarily, and blood was beginning to drip from the corner of her beak. But she was not dead yet. In pain, she still managed to limp over to the Mohawk. Trying to notch another arrow, the alien kicked the bow out of his hand. Gurgling on blood, she raised a talon above the young Mohawk's head. Then, before she could deliver the final blow herself, she stopped herself mid-attack. Blood gushed from her mouth even more as she looked down and saw a spear lodged in her gut. The spear went through her body and hit several major organs and arteries. Her black feathers were now caked in blood. She looked past the human and saw Vortigern, who managed to free himself amidst the encounter. She felt her legs give out and fell to her knees. Her breathing was long and slow. Avalon walked over and helped the Mohawk up. "You could have let her kill me," said Akanatokona. "True, but then I'd be no different from them now, would I?" said Avalon. They then looked at the alien. "What do we do with her?" "Leave her. Athena wouldn't last much longer. Her wounds are too great," replied Akanatokona. Yes, indeed, the avian was Athena, another member of the Pantheon. She looked at the two with anger in her eyes, her burning red eyes. "You will all burn for this," she said, trying not to choke on her own blood. "I have no doubt of that, but I will burn on Earth, not here," said Akanatokona. Just then the Guardian's voice was heard again. "Apologies, my king. I suggest we leave now. We have unknown enemies approaching." "Their location?" asked Vortigern. "5 are on the way here. The rest are following Amunis and Symbol toward the arena," said the Guardian. Athena chuckled. My, they're already here." "Who is here?" asked Avalon. "You carry a stone from the old times. You know exactly who they are," she said. "We have to leave now." Grabbing their gear, the three left the Black Mountains, but not without hearing Athena's blood-curdling laugh one last time. "And the great serpent will devour the skies and the world. We are all going to die," she cackled with her last breath. Chapter 27. "How far are we from the arena?" asked Symbol. The Spartan looked back at the gemstone. "Hopefully not much further," he replied. Out of all the groups, they were the only ones that had reached the desert, where the Spartan began his journey not too long ago. As they entered the vast sand sea, they were surprised by how hot the sand was, even still. Yet they pushed on. Then things got even more challenging. The sand grew hotter, the air tasted like smoke, and the sky felt darker. After a few miles, their beasts could not continue the journey and died of exhaustion. Grabbing their belongings off the dead carcasses, they continued onward. From here, the effects of the deserts did not stop for them. Amunis kept telling himself and Symbol that they were close, but it seemed that they were walking for days. Soon, they began to feel the weight of their belongings take its toll. "I need to rest," Symbol said. She felt her legs tire and lose strength. Amunis turned around and helped her keep moving. His little gestures worked for a while, but Symbol eventually collapsed. Setting down his gear, he grabbed her, placed her on his back, and carried her and his equipment. Despite wanting to quit, his Spartan training prevented him from doing so. He pushed onward, one step at a time. It seemed all was well until Amunis took one wrong step, causing him and Symbol to fall down the side of a dune. They tumbled down and landed face first, their gear scattered across the sands. The Spartan slowly lifted his head and began to feel the effects of the desert take its toll. "Got to keep moving," he said, struggling to get up, but no avail. He then sat in the sand and began to drift off into a long sleep. As he closed his eyes, he remembered the last moment with his mother before leaving for Plataea. Sparta, a week after the battle at the Hot Gates. After the victory at Salamis, the Persians no longer had their navy to support them. While Xerxes left to return home, he left General Mardonius to oversee the rest of the invasion. During this time, Sparta and Athens managed to ally together. Pausanias, the nephew of the fallen king, led the Spartan forces along with his regent Pleistarchus, his cousin. As the two leaders discussed where to attack with their allies, many young Spartans who had not fought at the Battle of Thermopylae were eager to test their prowess against the Persian invaders. One such Spartan was a young Amminus. His father fought alongside King Leonidas as one of the king's bodyguards. However, he was not allowed to partake as he was deemed too young and inexperienced. This irritated the young man, who desperately wanted to fight, but his father told him that his chance would come. And after learning what had happened to his father, that opportunity had come. He gathered his father's armor and sword at his family's house. As he began to dress, he noticed one thing was missing: his father's shield. To a Spartan, a shield was more than just a form of defense. It represented everything about the Spartan culture: its history, people, loyalty to the state, and above all, honor. He could not partake in the war without it. Searching all over the house, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw his mother with his father's shield. "Looking for this?" she said. His mother was Katharina, a proud Spartan woman, one of many who excelled in the Olympic Games, as well as logic. She came from an imposing, yet respected Spartan family. Every young Spartan tried to make her their wife, but they all failed, except for Amminus' father, who, according to her, saw something that she admired. She stood medium height with long, curly brown hair. Her eyes were golden like the summer sky, and she wore a simple white tunic covering her entire body. She then walked over to her son and presented the shield. "Why did you hide this?" he asked. "At first I didn't want you to go, but then I realized that you are as stubborn as your father. You are a Spartan now. I've always admired that trait about him," she chuckled. Handing him the shield, the young soldier marveled at how light it was. "That shield belonged to your grandfather, and his father before him. It's been in our family for a long time. It is a trusted item." Just outside the house, two Spartan guards knocked on the door. Katerina opened it and knew why they were here. "Has the army been summoned?" she asked. "Pausanias is moving the army. We need Amminus to come with us," said one Spartan. She turned back. "Spare us one moment." Yes, the Spartans obliged, but told her to make it quick. Closing the door, she went back to her son. Going to a nearby chest, she pulled out a cloth. Unraveling the materials inside was a beautiful crafted spear. She then handed it over to him. Amminus was lost for words. He could not hide the fact that he was shocked and amazed, despite being trained to control his emotions. "Mater, I don't know what to say," he said. "There isn't anything to say, except that I cannot be more proud of you," she replied. Katerina leaned in for a hug and kissed her son. She held him close and wished him well on his journey. She packed him some rations for the battles ahead and placed everything in a small leather bag. Giving it to her son, she was about to open the door when she saw her son's expression change momentarily. "Nervous?" she asked. Her son nodded. Letting go of the handle, she turned to him and gave him one last piece of advice. "Amminus, you know who we are. We are Spartans. You have been preparing for this your entire life. War is in your blood, as it is in mine and your father's. Let me tell you what my father told me when he went to war. He said that war is like a storm. You will bask in the sunlight momentarily and be shattered on the rocks the next. Yet what makes a Spartan is what he does when that storm comes. When it does, you must look into the storm and shout, 'Do your worst, for I shall do mine.'" Amminus woke from his dream. His mother's voice helped him remember his purpose. Getting up out of the sand, he looked around for the stone. After a few minutes of searching, he found it hidden underneath his shield. Grabbing it, he placed the stone in his pocket and gathered all the supplies from the sand. Putting them on his shield, he tied them to his back. He then saw Symbol still laid out in the sand. Rushing over to her, he gently picked her up like before, and carried her, this time across his shoulder. Amminus shouted into the sky with a newfound strength. and continued on his quest. Do your worst. I shall do mine. Chapter 28. Thanks to his renewed strength, Amanus reached the old arena's outskirts in just 2 hours. Taking a much-needed rest, he laid his gear along with Symbol on the sand. He took several deep breaths, in and out, to recover. Just then, Symbol started to wake up. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at the young Spartan. She noticed that they had then made it to the arena. Symbol was dumbfounded by this. "How the hell?" she asked. "I carried you," replied Amanus. "You carried me, including all of our supplies, by yourself." "That's impossible," she said. "For us Spartans, nothing is impossible." "I guess so." The young Celt turned her head over and saw the arena. She was impressed by the level of detail. "So, that is the place?" she asked. "So it seems." He grabbed his shield and tossed over Symbol's gear. The young Celt grabbed her sword and tied it around her belt. With both warriors situated, they embarked towards the arena. Making their way down a massive dune, they noticed the sand around it was different, blood-like in color. Nearing one of the entrances, they heard soldiers approaching. They quickly took shelter behind the fallen stone as the two warriors listened to the soldiers' conversation. "Still can't believe this rebellion will be over," said one. "Still can't believe the human betrayed his friend," said the other. "I'm not surprised. After all, he did the same thing with his group years ago. Remember that final raid at the Saurian stronghold? I already killed them amidst the chaos, save for his 2 friends. The Mohawk and the Samurai, I believe." "Yeah, I also heard that. He also hasn't told him the truth, saying they were killed by friendly fire. Can you believe that?" The soldiers were asked to stand watch and quit talking. Amanus and Symbol were horrified by this new revelation. "Did you hear that?" asked the Spartan. Symbol nodded her head. Richard was not only a traitor, but a murderer, and that gave Amanus even more reason to kill him. "We have to find a way in," Symbol whispered. "I don't see any openings," replied Amanus. Symbol then tapped the Spartan on the shoulder and showed him an opening east of the arena. The two quietly went to the entrance, popping their heads over to see the guards. Upon reaching it, they noticed the entrance was a tunnel leading into a chamber. Going inside, they found themselves in what appeared to be a training hall. All around them were statues of alien warriors, with some more human than the others. "Looks like we entered a memorial of some kind," said Symbol. "Hey, check this out," said Amanus. In front of the Spartan were 3 figures joined together. Unlike the others in the room, these 3 stood in unison and held something familiar. "Amanus, am I crazy, or is that the Moonstone?" asked Symbol. Upon further inspection, it was indeed the Moonstone. Just then, Amanus looked down at the ancient plaque of the memorial. It read, "Here we dedicate this statue to our saviors, Jean, Jagan, and Calvin, the warriors of the moon." Jean, Calvin, Jagan. Those are the same names Avalon told us back at the village. "Looks like we found a shrine." "Looks to be old, very old," replied Symbol. Though they wanted to know more, they had a job to do. Leaving the shrine, they entered a large hallway inside the arena grounds. As they cautiously made their way closer, they began to hear voices. The voices grew louder and more distinct with each step. Before entering the arena grounds, the 2 warriors hid behind opposite sides of the entrance. From here, they could make out the voices. It was Richard and Ares. "I trust you have the stone, Richard. My lord, Kairos, has grown impatient," said Ares. "Tell your wizard king I have his prize and expect to see him fulfill his end of the bargain," said Richard. "Yes, passage home in exchange for the stone. I'm well aware of the agreement," replied Ares. As the 2 discussed the terms of their arrangement, Amanus and Symbol planned their attack. "What should we do?" Amanus peeked his head around the wall. "We need to get the stone from them." "I understand that, but any ideas?" asked the Celt. "Decimus did have one, but it was very risky. We jump them now. Kill Ares and Richard, grab the stone." "That's it? We have to fight our way out? Is that what you're expecting?" asked Symbol. "We'll figure it out, don't worry. We just need to act now." Knowing it was now or never, the 2 crept into the arena. Just then a loud voice was in the air. "No! just as the entrance behind them closed. Above them, the stadium seats soon filled with Ares' men, each armed with crossbows. A dozen soldiers arrived on the arena floor and surrounded the two Earthlings. As Amanus and Symbol stood together, they heard someone clapping. That was Richard, making his way. The Englishman approached his former friends. He pinched the senator's brow and chuckled. You must be really desperate if you traveled all this way, only to die. And with that, viewers and listeners, we'll be taking a pause here, and we'll be starting part 2 in just a little bit.